Today we're continuing our off-season plan series and we're taking a look at the number 30th ranked team in the NHL this past year, the Ottawa Senators, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. So as I mentioned, today we're continuing on our series for the What's Next for the off-season plan series for the NHL, where all 31 teams will have their own dedicated video. Today we're on number 30, which is the Ottawa Senators. So we're counting down from 31 all the way to 1 throughout the NHL. So, of course, the Ottawa Senators didn't have a great season. Of course, they're, certainly not the same position they were just a few years removed from the Eastern Conference Final, which I know now for most fans kind of seems like an eternity, 2017, but they've certainly gone through some big parts of their rebuild and do have a bright future, I do believe. But let's jump in now and take a quick recap of their 2019-2020 NHL season. Of course, they finished with a record of 25, 34, and 12 for 62 points. As I mentioned, 30th in the NHL. Only Detroit was worse than them in their Atlantic Division. When it comes to their goals for, they scored 191 goals. They allowed 243 goals, so obviously not a great differential there. Obviously explains why they had a lot of losses. And of course, if you look at their record, they had a lot of overtime losses too. So it goes to show you, though, that this team, even though they lost a lot of hockey games, they were in it quite often, and there was a lot of, overtime one-goal losses. You add an extra 12 points to their record if those 12 overtime games become victories, and now we're up to 74 points. I mean, that's still not playoff contention, but it's a lot more respectable, and it just goes to show that, some small minor differences can actually get this team going here a long way. On special teams, they had the worst power play in the NHL at 14.2%, and they had a 28th ranked PK, which was not great either, 76.1%. Now, this team, I think, is going to be very, very busy this offseason. The Senators are going to be one of the teams that you're going to see all kinds of moves from when it comes to signings, trades, maybe dipping a little bit into free agency. They got 2 high picks in the draft. They have a lot of business to take care of. Pierre Dorion, like I said, will be one of the busier GMs around the NHL to keep your eye on. So let's take a look first up at some of the contracts he has to look after, because we have a lot of restricted free agents and a fair bit of UFAs. We'll take a look at their cap space here as well, and we'll kind of determine what moves we're likely going to see from this franchise. Let's start with the cap space, obviously, because that'll determine what a lot of these other moves can accommodate here. Now, from capfriendly.com, we have cap space of $39.5 million, which is a ton of money. They're not anywhere near being a cap team. They only have 9 players under contract for next year, so there's a lot of flexibility from management to kind of make some moves here. They have UFAs they don't have to bring back. They have some RFAs that they're likely to bring back, but there's a fair bit that they could not qualify as well, and they have all kinds of great prospects ready to take spots, so there's certainly a team in transition here. Now let's jump over and take a look at some of these contracts and kind of talk through what we're likely going to see. Now, since the RFAs are going to be so long and much more to talk about, we're going to start quickly here with the unrestricted free agents, because I don't think we're going to see very many, if any of them, possibly even return. If you look at the UFA list, they have Mikhail Bodker. Obviously, he is not coming back. He was acquired when they flipped Mike Hoffman to San Jose on his way to Florida. Bodker, I do believe, has already signed a contract to play in Europe next year, so he's not going to be returning. That's 100% guarantee. You've got Matthew Pekka, who they acquired from Montreal. Maybe slim chance, but I don't see it, considering how many other younger players that they're going to have on potential ELCs that need the spot. He was okay. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a contract somewheres. I don't see him returning to Ottawa, though. You've got Scott Sabourin as well, who certainly, made some surprises last year, made the team, but then obviously had a pretty serious injury, was out for a big chunk of the year. I think he's had his time at the NHL. Certainly, can play that physical role, be, somewhat of an enforcer. Not really an enforcer in today's NHL like there used to be, but I don't think he's got a spot there any longer either. You got goaltender Craig Anderson, who could come back, maybe. It's pretty doubtful, though. He's certainly declined in his play. He's getting up there in years. I think more likely Craig Anderson probably retires. That would be my best guess. But, I guess the Sens do have some questions around goaltending, and that'll have to be one of them to take a look at. And, of course, they have defenseman Mark Borieski. Now, he's a guy who I'm kind of surprised is not signed. He's a heart and soul kind of player, done a lot in the community, good in the dressing room, one of the leaders on the team, has been there a long time. Paid his dues in the American Hockey League for quite a while before he got his NHL chance. Seemed to be a guy even that Eugene Melnyk liked as well in Pierre Dorion. I'm surprised he's not signed as of yet. And if he's not signed as of yet to a cheap one-year deal or something like that, I think he's probably gone. I'm not sure why. I think that he could certainly have a spot there to be one of the few veteran defensemen and somebody who can actually stick up for his teammates. They do have a little bit of that in the forward group with Brady Tkachuk, but they could certainly use more of that. So it's surprising, but the fact he's not signed as of yet tells me that the odds of him coming back are not good. If he does come back, maybe they offer him a 1-year deal, cheap amount, $1 million, something to that effect. I don't know, but I don't think any of the UFAs are returning for Ottawa. Now, looking at their long list of RFAs, we've got some key guys here who are definitely, I think, going to be signed. It's just debatable what kind of contracts they get. You get center iceman Chris Tierney, who certainly played up too high in the lineup because of the lack of depth of the center position, but certainly proved that he can be more than a fourth-line center, which is what he was kind of getting in San Jose before the trade. But Tierney's a pretty useful utility player, can kind of go up and down the lineup. Like I said, chipped in more in offense than we've probably expected. But he can certainly have a role in the team. But as some of the younger guys work their way up, he's definitely going to be a bottom six center when he's slotted appropriately, but still a guy certainly worth keeping around. You get Connor Brown, who's leading the team in points. Great pickup from the Leafs, obviously, in that Zaitsev trade. He was the sweetener to take the Zaitsev contract when they dumped Cody Ceci. Obviously, Zaitsev had a lot more term than Cody did, so it made sense that the Leafs had to add something extra, and Brown was that guy. He's got great speed. It certainly proved to be a really key member of their forward group. Again, I don't think he's going to get a ton of money, but a guy that they're definitely going to want to keep in the fold here and get, a semi-long-term deal. I'm not sure if he'll get like a 7-8 year deal, but I can see Brown probably getting at least 4 to 5 years, maybe $3-4 million, maybe a little bit more. Debatable. I'm not sure exactly what kind of contract he gets, but it's not going to be a short-term deal unless they have super hard time coming to negotiation or something to that. But Brown's a guy worth keeping around. Same with Anthony Duclair, obviously kind of hot and cold. He had a lot of goals, but he also had big stretches with none. And so Duclair proved that he can play. He proved that he found himself a home. I would be cautious, though, with his contract. I wouldn't go too long and too much, because he needs to improve his consistency. And I would kind of take the same approach I did with Mike Hoffman back when he was in that position. If you want that longer-term contract, the bigger money, you're going to have to continue to prove the consistency, because it's just not there. I mean, when you go, stretches of 20-plus games without a point or a goal, then that's obviously not good. I mean, and to a degree, he did have some bad luck in there, but he got off to a hot start and then really cooled off, where you like to see that throughout the year. And we'll see what happens. But Duclair's definitely going to get signed, just a matter of how long and how much. But like I said, cautiously optimistic about the future of Duclair in the Sens organization. Now, some other guys here certainly up for debate. You've got Rudolph Balcers. I think he definitely gets signed, but not sure what his role is yet. You get Nick Paul, probably gets another 1-year deal. He was certainly proved last year he could play at the NHL level more consistently. He's been in there a long time. Came over for the Jason Spezza trade from the Stars way back. I can see him getting a 1-year contract. Jace Harwilak, who they picked up from Florida, debatable. Andreas Eglund's been in the system a long time. They have a lot of defensemen, so again, debatable. Maybe a 1-year deal for him. Philip Schlappick, I think he likely gets signed. He could still be a player for them. Then you got Christian Jaros and JC Baudin. Again, debatable guys. They're all fringe players. Baudin likely will lose his spot over time if he does get signed, because of all the other prospects that will kind of outperform him. And Jaros is a guy who seemed to be getting a lot of time with Guy Boucher, but didn't really get a lot of time last year with DJ Smith. So again, he's a right shot D. He seemed to be okay, but I'm not quite sure if he's a regular NHL defenseman at this point. So a lot of those guys, it's debatable when they if they get signed or not. Some of them will have to be signed to 2-way deals if they are signed, so that they can easily play down in their system in the American Hockey League in Belleville. Now, they also have a couple of prospects, including Vitaly Abramov and Lassie Thompson, who are going to start the year in Europe, but will certainly be welcome to come over to a training camp once that gets underway, hopefully in mid to late November, if everything goes as planned for right now, how the NHL season's hoping to go for 2020, 2021. So they will start the year in Europe, but can be recalled at any time. Now, as far as what are the key things that the Sens need to do this offseason besides looking at some of these contracts? Well, clearly, in my opinion, Brady Tkachuk is a massive player that they need to lock up long term, and that's not going to be easy. We saw last year with his brother Matthew Tkachuk how the Tkachuk family's been in the game a long time. They have connections to a player agent as well, which I believe Keith Tkachuk's sister is married to agent Craig Oster, even though I don't believe he represents Brady. I think he represents Matthew, but I believe Brady went with a different agent. But either way, they're between his father Keith, his brother Matthew. They're not going to be taking this lightly. They're going to make sure he gets the right deal. But to sign him to a mega long-term deal, slap the C on his chest, in my opinion, would be the perfect move. It should give a really good sign of faith to the Sens loyal fans who have stuck with this team that something real positive can be coming out of that. I think that's, he's a big part of the future. They don't have to get this done this year because he's only going into the last year of a entry-level deal where he'll become an RFA next year, but it'd be nice to get ahead of that like they did with Thomas Chabot and get a long-term deal in place. So they weren't afraid to pay Chabot, so show Brady the money, make him part of the future, and I personally, for me, I'd slap the C right on his chest right away, but that's just my take. Now, of course, they need to address goaltending as well. Like I mentioned, Anderson probably doesn't come back. Do the goals Anders Nielsen and Marcus Högberg? Can Nielsen stay healthy? Is he recovered? I know he battled concussions at the end of the season before it was paused. Certainly some question marks there. They have some great young goalies, at least that look to be potentially great in the system, like Gustafsson and Decord. They have Sogard, who's not signed yet as well, but he's another potentially the best of all the prospect goaltenders based on how they look so far. But they need to decide if they need another veteran guy in there or not, or can Nielsen play with Högberg. I think I'd be content to let Högberg run with it at the NHL level, where there'd be, at least as a backup, because he proved last year that he can play. If he can get the goal support, he would have done much better for sure. And obviously that depends on the team in front of him. Obviously, the Sens have picks 3 and 5 in the 2020 draft, so they have to make sure that they don't screw those up and they get great selections. The number 3 pick should be pretty easy because obviously the Rangers and Kings are picking ahead of them at 1-2, and they're going to get the third best player that's not taken. So they're either likely going to get Quentin Byfield, the big center iceman from Sudbury, or Tim Stützle, the terrific hockey player out of the Germany program. So either way, they're getting themselves a great player there, and I'm convinced that it has to be one of those two guys. As long as they don't go off the board, I think they'll be good. Now at 5, there's been a lot of rumblings. They really like Lucas Raymond from Sweden, and that would be a great selection as well. He has potential to be a high-end winger. Like two-way, you've got Jamie Drysdale, the top defenseman, Marco Rossi. Difficult to say exactly where they go, but they need to make sure they put those selections to great use. If they're not going to bring back guys like Ron Hainsey, Mark Borieski as unrestricted free agent defensemen, I'd recommend bringing in another veteran D of some kind. They need to have a presence back there. I know I didn't mention Hainsey when we were looking at the UFAs, but he's another guy not expected to return. But obviously, they need somebody back there who's got some more experience. So I'd recommend bringing in somebody from the free agency list. And they really need to weaponize their cap space. I mean, they have tons of it. They could take on a bad contract to get some sweeteners in there. Talk to teams who have deals that they're not fond of to get some high draft picks or some great young players that they can add into the mix as well. Like, Vancouver with Louis Eriksson, for example, just one that comes to mind. Like, they have means to do that, especially some of these contracts. They might have a big cap hit, but they don't have a lot of cash on it, which is great for them since they kind of have an owner who's notorious for being a tad on the cheap side, or, whatever you want to call them. So that would work to get some more future assets for this team as well. They have it. Might as well put it to good use. So I hope Pierre Dorion and his staff take advantage of that, because it won't be long when some of these other players start graduating out of their system here. They're going to need to be paid more, and obviously they can't hamper themselves too much moving forward. But lastly here, they need to incorporate as much youth as possible. Guys like Drake Batherson, Eric Brandstrom, Alex Formanton, Josh Norris need to gain bigger roles and get more opportunities this year. They're a team that's filled with youth, and the only way to really see what they have is to give them even more opportunity and kind of clear out a little bit of the veterans. As I mentioned, that's why a lot of these veterans I don't expect to be back, because they'll make spot for their young players on the roster. So those are my thoughts on how the offseason should go for the 30th ranked Ottawa Senators. I certainly expect to be better next year. How much better, it's debatable, but they're on the right path. They have a great future. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Stay tuned for the 29th ranked team coming up in the next video in this series tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.